weather situation, as you're all aware, is not improving in terms of the delayed rains. We have had the long rains delayed in certain parts of the country. We are still hopeful that the rains will come and all will be well. But in the event that this does not happen, the experts are also indicating that the situation could worsen. But as government, we are prepared for any eventuality in terms of setting aside enough resources, in terms of putting in place the necessary interventions and remedial measures to deal with the situation. And we are also urging the county governments to do the same, to up their game, to be able to set aside enough resources. The implications of this weather outlook is that if the long range delay any further, we are talking of another 2 or 3 weeks, we might see widespread crop failure, we might see more scarcity in water, and we might have our livestock affected. We might look at more cases of malnutrition, and we'll need interventions from our Ministry of Health and disease outbreaks that could come with the increased drought situation. We're not just talking about human beings. We could also have our livestock affected.
Kenya is not in a good place. That is Devolution Cabinet Secretary Eugene Wamalwa. So 13 counties have been adversely affected by the prolonged drought. About 1.85 billion shillings has been set aside to mitigate effects of the drought, and a further 682 million has been released to the Ministry of Devolution to help in relief food. Meanwhile, the Meteorological Department says most parts of the country will continue experiencing dry weather conditions as the effects of the delayed March, April, May rains continue to be felt. Now, although the Kenya Meteorological Department has predicted that there will be rain in various regions in the next 3 days, dry conditions will continue to be felt in coming days. And so, Devolution Cabinet Secretary Eugene Wamalwa today asked counties to set aside emergency fund for the same. Hope is that it will rain sometime soon. But question is, what if it doesn't rain? What options does Kenya have? What options do Kenyans have? That is the focus of our big story this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Belinda Ogutu. Let me now take you to our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who's seeking those same answers from the Meteorological Department here in Nairobi. Sophia.
Good evening, Linda. So we heard earlier today from CS Devolution, Arid and Semi-Arid Lands, Eugene Wamalwa, saying that the drought continues to ravage 13 counties in the country. 4 of them worst hit. The situation there is dire and anticipated to get worse. However, government is maintaining that there is enough food within Kenyan borders and that the challenge right now is moving the food from the surplus regions and areas to the deficit areas. However, what's interesting, just recently on Checkpoint, when we're talking about this drought and speaking to NDMA, which is the authority, the government agency that is mandated to ensure droughts do not lead to emergencies, and we do have an emergency now. So the question to them was, have they failed Kenyans? But at the time when he spoke to the CEO, he appeared to point an accusing finger at the Meteorological Department, saying that some of the data they're receiving was not accurate, and so perhaps one of the challenges they're facing in as far as preps and planning and coordination. The same sentiment was echoed in that same interview by the Turkana Governor Josephat Nanok, again saying that some of the information they're getting to be able to allow them to plan properly is not 100% accurate. So this today we've come to the Meteorological Department, and I have an assistant director with me, James Muhindi. Thank you so much for making time for us here on KTN News. So let's begin with first that you have NDMA, which is a critical stakeholder in this. You have some of the county governments saying that the Meteorological Department is not perhaps painting a full exact picture of where Kenya is and where she's going in as far as weather focused.
Okay. Well, I would say partly yes and partly no. First and foremost, when you're talking of forecast, there is no forecast which can be 100%. But a forecast is supposed to be accurate enough to guide the users and the stakeholders. What there is that we should have forecast, and that forecast was talking of near normal conditions over the eastern, the western and the central parts of the country. But areas like southeastern Kenya and most parts of northeastern Kenya, we are still expecting depressed rainfall. But it happens that there are some occurrences which sometimes, they not sometimes, but always you cannot see them occurring. And the occurrence I'm talking about concerns the tropical cyclones. You can give a very good forecast, and the forecast is showing very good rainfall, even above normal rainfall. But tropical cyclones, when they occur, they mess up everything. And what happens is that they divert all the moisture from the Indian Ocean. So I'm talking of the tropical cyclones which are occurring in the Indian Ocean. What happens is that if they happen to occur somewhere around the Maraga's Island in the Mozambique Channel, they divert all the moisture which is supposed to come into our country. And you find that more than often, we have generally dry conditions occurring over most parts of the country because there is no moisture which is penetrating from the Indian Ocean. So this is basically what happened when the season was just beginning somewhere in early March. We had one tropical cyclone. I think everybody now knows about that tropical cyclone called Idai. And for your information, when you're talking about tropical cyclone, is a very, very low pressure system, and normally winds prefer areas where the pressures are lowest. So what happened is that once that cyclone is there, it is sucking all the moisture. There's no moisture which was penetrating into the country. And once we noted that this cyclone is there, we issued an alert telling all the stakeholders that what was predicted as near normal rainfall is likely to be delayed. First and foremost, we're saying that the onset was going to be delayed. Secondly, once the onset is delayed, you expect even the amounts to be below average. And we have been very, very consistent in telling people that unless things change in the Indian Ocean, we may not expect much. So it's always going to adjust. You don't stick to the initial information which you are given. It's good also to issue an alert or to listen to the alerts which are being issued by the Kenya Meteorological Department. And this is where we are. And as we talk now, nothing has changed significantly. The tropical cyclones may not be there, but the cause of the tropical cyclone is still there. And there are chances even now that you can have another tropical cyclone, which can even make the situation even worse. Right now, the rain-bearing system, the one which is referred to as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, is still further south over Tanzania, southern and central Tanzania, such that even the northern parts of Tanzania, they don't have much of the rains. And now, unless the situation changes in the Indian Ocean, it may be delayed for about 1 or 2 weeks again before it can come to Kenya.
All right. So let's come back to this month is when we're expecting rains.
Yeah.
So paint for us a picture of what is likely to happen, first in the affected counties, but also even here in Nairobi, the heat has been something else. And everyone is saying, I thought the rains were to come and they have delayed. So what should we expect?
Well, when such a situation occurs, first and foremost, the rainfall during last year's short rains was not very good. And when you're talking of a drought is cumulative. And when I talk of cumulative, it means we had a season where the rainfall was not very good in terms of performance. And if it is followed by another poor season in terms of rainfall, that's the time you can start talk of a drought coming up. But as far as we are concerned right now, the situation over most parts of the country, apart from those 38 countries which you are talking about, particularly over northeastern and parts of southeastern, otherwise Western Kenya, I would say the situation is not bad. One thing we know that for sure is that there is harvest in those parts of Western Kenya. There's still some food which is in the stores. And what we're expecting that is in the coming maybe 1-2 weeks, the rains may start again over Western Kenya. And the good thing with Western Kenya, even after the month of May, the rains continue into June, July, August.
So what kind of rains? Short rains, long rains, heavy rains, light? What kind of downpour are we expecting?
Well, I would say no more rains, particularly when it comes now to June, July, August for the western parts of the country. We would expect normal performance of rainfall. But for those areas which are being affected, it's as if the situation is not likely to reverse, because those are the areas where you're expecting poor rainfall to continue. Say areas like southeastern Kenya and most parts of northeastern Kenya, we are not expecting any good rainfall performance. The other country is Turkana country, which has been affected. The rainfall which is expected there is likely to be depressed for the rest of the remainder of the season. So those areas are not likely to recover. And that's why we are saying maybe in those areas, contingency measures should continue being put in place. Yeah.
Because there was concern, especially for counties like Turkana, that from a drought, they may very soon get into a situation where, again, it's floods. We have seen that in the past. So you're saying it's not going to be a heavy rain as to the extent of flooding?
Not really. The kind of rainfall you're expecting, it's either near normal, and even if you have to get very heavy rainfall, it's what you call episodic, whereby it's not continuous. It's for 1-2 days where you can get what we call a flash floods, but not anything which is to continue. It's very unlikely that we can get continuous rainfall, which can cause flooding in places like northeastern and northwestern Kenya. Okay. So if anything is either normal and then tending to be normal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you, sir, is that what we are facing now as a country is a situation out of our control as Kenyans. It is not something negative that we are doing to Mother Nature. It's something happening in the Indian Ocean somewhere.
That's basically true, because this is nature which you cannot control. Whatever is happening in the Indian Ocean, people sometimes think that meteorologists can reverse some things, but these occurrences, you can forecast them, but there is no you can reverse. If it is happening, it's happening. These are natural phenomena, and there is nothing you can do about it. We have had some people calling here and saying, you meteorologists, where is rain? We want rain. The meteorologists, they're just there to focus, but not to manufacture rain.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of the issue around this has been for many Kenyans, and we've covered this in the media, is that when you give this report and forecast, sometimes action on it is delayed, and we see the blame games. So whilst you are not, part of the teams that are supposed to action, you share the information, but do you feel that there's a breakdown somewhere? Because, for instance, NDMA is meant to ensure we do not get to an emergency. We are in an emergency situation. So for you, what needs to happen to ensure that the information you relay is actioned and acted upon in good time to ensure we don't see cases where Kenyans are dying?
Well, first and foremost, I don't want to commit myself to saying that maybe the information is not used or something. But you have had cases, of course, where there is information, it is on somebody's table, and that information maybe is not used as the way it's supposed to be used. For this particular case, I'm not saying that the information was not used, but all I'm saying is that even after issuing our initial forecast, we were very, very fast in issuing an alert that what was expected, there are cyclones which have come in the Indian Ocean, so that's the time we ought to have acted very, very fast. And again, I've said drought is not caused by the failure of one season. It's cumulative. Once the drought failed during the short rains, and then we issued an alert, that's the time measures were supposed to be taken. When we issued an alert that the rainfall which we are expecting is likely not to be very, very okay over most parts of the country, and particularly we're emphasizing on the eastern sector of the country. But I don't want to commit myself saying that maybe the information was not used. That is not for me.
Yeah.
Sure, yes.
To comment on the same. But when you look at, the government is also saying, and we had the CS earlier talk about, this is not as bad as 2017.
It's not anywhere near that.
No, you said not anywhere near that. But talk to us about, is it likely to get there? Because what you're saying is that some of these events and the occurrences in the Indian Ocean are beyond anyone's control. So could they be exacerbated? Could we find ourselves in a situation where things get worse than they are right now, and we get to ourselves to a famine? Because the government has maintained we have a drought, not a famine.
Yeah. Well, right now I can't see it's going to that extent, like what you're saying, like 2017, because that was a serious one. And in fact, the entire country, we had a very serious deficit of rainfall. Right now, I'm repeating, the western parts of the country and central areas, in some days to come, you're likely to see some good rains coming in. And again, I've said, some of these areas, western, they continue getting rainfall into June, July, August. And this time loud, we are seeing that the rainfall may be good. And more than often, that rainfall spews into the central parts of the country. And this, I think, where we have most of the agricultural people. Maybe the areas which are likely to be affected mainly are the pastoral areas. But in terms of agriculture, we may not be badly off, owing to the fact that we still have a lot of food. Okay. Definitely, there is no doubt that we have got food in the country. And if you are going to get rains continuing for western parts of the country, I can assure you that come August, September, October, we are going to see some harvest. The situation may not be that bad off. Yeah.
Finally, sir, talk to me about climate change. It is real, it is happening, it is not only affecting Kenya, the rest of the world. For ordinary Mwananchi watching, what do we need to look out for? What do we need to be more cautious about Mother Nature? Because we know she's very unforgiving. So the way we treat her, in the same measure will she respond. So for you, knowing and seeing what you've seen over the years, what do we need to be aware of as far as climate change is concerned?
You have said it, that climate change is real, and the fact of the matter is that when you're talking of climate change, is a global issue. Much as we'd like to say that we have got some changes occurring in Kenya, like what you are saying, tree planting, because one of the major cause of this climate change, we have cleared our forests, and I'm not talking of Kenya, I'm talking of globally. Everywhere you find that they are clearing the forest, and that is one major source of what you call the carbon sink, Now, the problem is that is only one of the effect. We have got industrialization which is taking place, and one of the countries which are highly industrialized is like America, Britain. They have always gone to these conferences, and when they talk of things like industrialization and how they are going to cope up with this emission of this, what we call the greenhouse gases, they are not serious about how they can reduce these greenhouse gases. Kenya is a very small country if you consider the entire globe. To me, I'm saying this is not something which is like going to change the trend we have currently. But for Kenya, the part we can play is what now we are doing currently, trying to increase the forest cover such that it can reach the 10 to 11% forest cover, which would be good enough. But is it being done elsewhere in the globe? Because when you're talking of climate change, the source of climate change is not Kenya. The source of climate change can be coming as far as from America and elsewhere, because this is something global. And when you refer to what we call the global circulation of winds, what affects us here is not what is in Kenya. We have what we call the teleconnection, which could be coming from very, very far. You have heard us talking of El Nino. El Nino is not a Kenyan phenomenon. It's a signal which is observed all the way from the Pacific. So if you're talking of climate change, the influence is not from Kenya. It's from very far. So it's something we need to maybe hold hands together, but globally, maybe to avert the situation. But all I know is that it's not a trend which is likely to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. James Muhindi is Assistant Director here at the Meteorological Department, saying that at the end of the day, it is not as bad as it was, what we heard from the Minister earlier in 2017. But of course, Linda, what is important right now for those Kenyans affected, once the government maintains there is enough food, is that they get that food. And this situation, if in fact it does get worse and affects more counties than the already 13 counties that are hit by the drought, will it also be another food aid situation, or will the government ensure these individuals, these regions, plus the county governments, remember that their people get food in good time? But also water harvesting and stopping to rely on agriculture, fed agriculture, as we've talked about in the past, and the government maintained irrigation is the way to go. So we'll see what happens in coming days, Linda.
Yeah, like you did mention, the most important bit is to make sure